So I'm going to hand it over to Karen Gifford to start us off and get us in the mindset to begin today.
Thanks, Nahid. Welcome, everybody. We've all come into this session probably from some other place. And so since we are all coaches, and we're going to have some tips later on, we're going to start with a tip when you're running a mastermind group, and that's to do some breathing stretches to get us all grounded and centered before we begin. How's that sound, everyone? All right. So just 3 simple breaths in. Hold it at the top. If you feel like stretching your arms over your head, you can, and exhale out. Okay, everybody? Ready? Breathing in. Reach, stretch, keep those shoulders down and exhale. One more time, breathing in. Stretch and exhale. One last time, breathing in. Really stretch. When you exhale, you can close your eyes or open them when you are ready to enter the room, whatever works for you. Thanks, everybody. Nahid, passing it back to you.
Okay, and what I'm doing right now is I am pulling up the handout for today so that I can put it in the chat for you. It's a PDF document called Mastermind Facilitation Tips, and I just uploaded it this second. So Jennifer Phillips, who's in the waiting room, is not going to get it. So I suppose I should upload it again, or someone else can maybe upload it to her. That would be great. Then I can start us off. So what we're going to do is launch you sort of right into a mastermind process today.
Yeah, it's not a good practice to fix those.
I'm going to ask you all to mute.
Yeah.
Please.
All right. And Claudia.
Okay. Rania, can you kind of look at the participants on the back end for me? And that way I can focus on a process as opposed to managing the participants.
Yes, just make me co-host so I can do that.
Okay, so you aren't. Here we go. There you go. All right. Thank you for your patience with our logistical stuff. Okay, so what we're going to do now that you've kind of got the handout and you're able to download it, if anyone can be so kind as to upload it back up, that would be great. Or maybe Karen, you can, since you have it. Just upload it back into chat. And meanwhile, I'm going to give you a screenshot of it. But let me tell you what we're going to do today. Today, we are going to actually walk you through a mastermind experience so you can actually feel what it's like. And then we're going to talk about best practices and tips. And at the end, we're going to talk about the mastermind program that we're launching. So in order to walk through the mastermind process, what I'll be asking for is a volunteer. And because we're recording, I'm going to ask you to choose something related to your business, maybe a decision that you're trying to make, or something that you would love to hear other people's opinions about. But let's make it something light, not something that you have a lot of deep emotion to work out about it, because this is a demonstration. We want to make things light, and we want people to kind of see the whole process as opposed to getting too deeply involved in the situation itself. So I'm going to let you guys all percolate on that for just a second, and then I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to show you what's on the handout. You can share. Okay. Excuse me, I'm trying to click. There we go. It's coming up now. All right. Do you guys see on the screen where it says Nahid's favorite mastermind process? So this handout includes kind of all the things that I've learned in the last more than 20 years now that I've been coaching. And to kind of give you perspective, my coaching business has included groups from the beginning. So over 25 years of managing groups and facilitating groups and doing group coaching and group training as part of my process. So there's a lot of facilitation involved in that. But then also I have been a part of mastermind groups. So I've created mastermind groups and kind of facilitated them or co-facilitated them. And I've also joined mastermind groups as just a participant. So from all of that experience, what is on this worksheet that you'll have, this tip sheet, is just what I have decided are the best practices based on my perspective and my experience. And the reason I'm saying that is because there's probably other ways to do it that are just as good. But this is my way of doing it that I'm sharing with you today. So my favorite mastermind process is very simple. You can kind of flex it out or scrunch it in depending on the amount of time we have. And we're going to go through the more abbreviated process that's perfectly appropriate to do when you're doing a Zoom mastermind group. It has 5 steps. The step is our volunteer, and I don't like using the word client because it makes it too much like a coaching situation. And this isn't exactly coaching. This has a lot of components of coaching, but this is not group coaching. So that's why I'm calling it volunteer. That's the person that comes up and shares their issue and gets all the ideas from the mastermind. The first step, the volunteer is just going to share. The second step, the group's going to ask the volunteer some questions to help the volunteer think a little bit more deeply about their issue. And then step 3 is really just a very quick transition step where our volunteer is going to say, what I want to hear from the group is. That step's very important because we don't want the group just throwing all their ideas out at you because some of them won't be what you really want or need. So when the volunteer says what I want to hear from the group is, then they can get very specific. Like, I would love to hear your experiences doing X, or I would like your opinion on Y. So the more specific you can get as the volunteer, then the better feedback you're going to get from the group. Then in our step 4, that's when we go around and the group shares all of their ideas and anything that comes up for them that might be useful for the volunteer. And then step 5 is a wrap-up step. So that's what we're going to experience now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see all of you. And everyone's got the handout. So who would like to be our volunteer? Let's see if we can get somebody to volunteer. Just something light that you might like to get people's feedback on. Ah, Raksha, thank you.
Well,
So let's go ahead and pin her.
before we start, can I just ask if this is light enough or should I wait?
Yes, you can.
Well, because I'm just starting my business, unless somebody else wants to raise their hand, I can go. It's about trying to find clients. So I don't know if that's a heavy thing or suitable for this.
I think it's very suitable. I think
Okay.
it's very suitable. What do the rest of you think? Probably everyone else has the exact same question, which is how to find clients. I think that's going to be
the only question.
I think that's the only client's question anybody has ever. So it's perfect. All right. So I'm pronouncing your name right? Raksha?
Yes, you
Okay.
are. Mhm.
Thank you. So Raksha, what we're going to do for the first step is I'm going to have you take your phone and set your timer to 2 minutes. You have 3 minutes, but we really don't want you to have to think. We want you to just kind of be able to spill out anything however you want. So if you set your timer to 2 minutes and then when it goes off, you know you have another minute to sort of wrap it up. Okay? Just share kind of anything you'd like about this issue of trying to get more clients.
Okay. So I am at the point of getting into learning about coaching and training, but I do have 30 years of experience in IT tech and in leadership also. So, and a lot of them say just try to stay within your network to find coaching clients. But I think moving from like an IT tech where I'm in project management and in leadership position, trying to kind of move into how do I find people that I can coach and define coaching, because a lot of them look at me as from a mentor standpoint. So that's a challenge, because for them it's like, well, I know what you do best, but what is this coaching thing? That's kind of like what I get from them. So what I'm struggling right now is, and the other challenge is that I really have not done a great job in networking a lot outside of, like, I got so comfortable in everything I do, working so hard, long hours, that I really did not invest any time into networking at like Project Management Institute, Chamber, all of those. So yeah, so right now my challenge is like, where do I go to find clients? How do I take out that, what people think that I'm like a project management, leadership, kind of take that out and say, hey, I'm coming in as a coach. And look at me, try me, kind of, yeah.
Love that. And you don't have to finish using the 2 minutes if you don't want, but if you have anything else you'd like to say, you're welcome to.
The only other thing is that I'm still currently working in my full-time job, and I've given myself like through 2026 to really ramp up on my business and get clients and establish myself the credibility so that I can, actually launch my own. Well, I've started my company, but I want to kind of go full-time into it. So 2026 is the year to transition.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being our volunteer. So one thing that I didn't mention at the beginning of this, but I think it'll be very useful for you to all take note of, and just hold that and don't forget anything you heard, because we're talking our way through this process. How many of you, when you were listening to Raksha, had tons of ideas coming up for her in your head? Tons of ideas coming up, things that you wanted to ask her or tell you. So that's always what happens when the person's talking. So one of the tips that I often use is I have everyone in the mastermind group have paper to write them down. Because what happens is when we get ideas for people, we don't want to forget the idea, so that it stays in our short-term memory until we can actually say it. And we're not going to say the idea till further down in the process. So because of that, usually I will ask everyone in the mastermind group to write down their ideas as they go, so that they can keep their head empty, not have to store everything in short-term memory, and truly listen well. Because you're not going to be sharing your ideas with Raksha yet. In phase 2, we're going to be asking her questions. And for those of you, because you have coaching background, this part's going to be especially good for you, because we're going to be asking her coaching questions. And most of the time when we do mastermind groups, we run into people that they have all those ideas in their head. So the first thing they do is they ask what I call questions, which are suggestions. They know it's the questioning time. So instead of telling the person what to do, they say, have you tried this? So it's a question, but it's really their advice cloaked in a question. We don't ask those kinds of questions in this mastermind group at all, in this process at all. The other thing that I've noticed that people do is they jump into consulting mode. Well, my job's to give you advice, so I'm going to ask you more about your situation. Okay, those are sort of the getting to know you types of questions. Those questions aren't necessarily harmful, but what they end up doing is they get the person to just talk more about their story and their perspective and give more information. They're not really productive questions. So what we do is we want to ask Raksha some questions that might get her to think more deeply about her own issue. And those questions are very similar to coaching questions. In fact, they are the same kinds of questions. So we usually have time for about 5. And Raksha, your role in this is you listen to the question and you are welcome to respond to it if you want, or you're welcome to just go, oh, good question. I want to think about that. You don't have to answer them all, because sometimes they might require some contemplation, especially if they're good coaching questions, right? All right, so I'm just going to have you, for sake of time, and since we're on Zoom, raise your hand, and let's see if we can, as a group, together, ask Raksha 5 good questions. Who has a question for Raksha? Terry, you're going to have to go off mute.
Hi, Raksha. My question is, what type of clients do you want to attract?
So due to my background being in software tech in small to medium companies. I'm targeting middle managers or above as the initial target market and target clients.
Excellent. And who else has a question for Raksha? Just hit your hand raise so I can call on you. Tony.
Hi, Raksha. I enjoyed
Good.
listening to you. So my question for you is, if you go to your innermost self, where do you think your clients lie?
I will have to think about that.
Okay, excellent. Who else has a question? Rania.
So, Raksha, what techniques you used and worked for you? What worked for you before?
You mean like from coaching or?
No, and from getting your clients.
I don't have any right now because I work full time right now and I'm just started my coaching journey like in September 2024 with training. So I'm still training. I'm doing peer coaching, but I don't have a coaching client yet.
Okay. Thank you.
So Nikki's going to be next, but before Nikki, I've got one, which is a saddleback to Rania's, and that is, Raksha, in any endeavor, when you've had to get out there and either sell yourself or sell an idea or anything, what's worked for you?
So I did, in 2002, I opened my own software consulting company. And in that case, it was really my background in project management and software because I come from software engineering background. That's what helped me to sell my services. And to a large extent, it was a lot of word of mouth because of my experience. That, like my previous boss, he kind of recommended someone, and from there it kept going, which I think is also what's adding to this apprehension right now, because my past word of mouth was because of the experience people had seen. And I don't know how transferable that is right now.
Excellent. Nikki.
So recognizing you don't have a ton of experience in paid coaching, but kind of working through that process, what makes you a good coach?
Good question. I think it's I think the peer coaching has exposed a few things, because I kind of questioned that myself, coming from a point of always telling people what to do to trying to go into like the curiosity mindset. I think with peer coaching, I've surprised myself because a lot of the feedback I'm getting from peer coaches is that I'm a very good listener. I give them the space and basically very non-judgmental. So it's like they feel safe to share things. So I kind of surprised myself because I was very apprehensive about that too, because, you know, when you're a vice president, a lot of times I'm demanding things and making things happen. So, so now actually I feel comfortable that I think I am providing that to people. So we do 30-minute sessions. I have about 20 hours now. So that's about 40 sessions that has been done. So that's been good. That feedback has reinforced into me. I'm still training to ask the right questions. Yeah. But I think those are the three, though. The feedback that I heard consistently is which I feel is going to help me be a good coach.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Raksha, and thank you for all of you that asked questions. We're now going to be moving into phase 3 of our process, 3 of 5. And Raksha, simply, you have all these brains in the room with you, and you're just going to ask one question, which is what you want to hear from their brains. Okay, what would you like to hear from them? And then what we're going to do, just so that you're all prepared, is I'm just going to do, because we have about 14 of us in here, I'm just going to go around and call on you one at a time. And if you've got something to share, share it. If you don't have anything to share, you can pass. If you want to add on to what someone else said, go ahead and do it. And I'll give you a little bit more guidance on that in just a minute. So Raksha, what would you like to hear from the group?
Then I need your guidance on this, Nahid. If I don't know if how wide or narrow it should be, my question.
Mm-hmm.
But I think having heard what I've shared about my background and where I'm at, I'd love to hear from the group. What should I highlight when I'm approaching or when I'm trying to not sell my services, when I talk to people?
I think that's a great question.
Okay.
That's an excellent question because it really guides our brains and it tells us. Now, during this next phase, one of the big pitfalls that happens in groups is they start getting into discussions about everybody's idea. So in order to prevent that from happening, Raksha is simply going to take notes. She can say thank you if she wants, but for the most part, she's not gonna ask you any questions about your idea or whatever. And the way we're going to be giving her our ideas is just as possible gifts. We understand in advance that some of the stuff that we're going to throw out at her from our brains is not going to be useful to her at all. And the grace that we're going to send it to her with, we understand that she might just pick a couple of gems from the whole group, and that's fine. So we're kind of giving our ideas and our thoughts just kind of in the spirit of a gift for her to either take or not. Make sense? Any questions? All right, so I'm just going to go around and just call on people. And what I'd like Raksha to do is just take some notes, and then we'll go on to step 5. All right. All right. Karen, can I start with you? Karen Gifford?
Sure. Raksha, what I would like to offer as a gift for you is to trust yourself.
Okay. And let's go to the other Karen, Karen McBray. Okay. So
I got nothing. I'm sorry.
that's all right. Rania.
Okay, so the question was what do you tell your clients when you approach them? Tell them about the results that they will have after they talk with you. So, when you sell a drill, they tell you don't talk about how the drill looks like, but the hole that the drill will make in the wall. So the results that they will get.
Excellent, Rania. And Tony.
Well, my gift is I would like you to describe in detail, it's similar to Rania, what the benefit of you personally coaching me, a client, would be. What are the results? Very similar to what Rania said. What's your value prop?
Excellent. And what would you add, Nikki?
I would add that maybe you approach the people that you've mentored in the past and ask them to trust you on a new journey, and that coaching is very different from mentoring, but you think it might be very valuable for them, and maybe give them a 30-minute conversation where you really adhere to those coaching principles and show them the difference, how they solve their problems versus you solving their problems.
Thank you.
Doug.
I think the most important thing for the client in picking a coach is somebody they can trust. So I think you want to talk about why they can trust you. You want to talk about your business experience in the problems you've solved, in the things you've held confidential, and the trust people have put into you. And I think that would sort of set the stage for them, which you would then follow up with, how coaching would then apply to that.
Thank you.
Excellent. And Jackie, what would you add?
What comes to mind is Rich Lippman. He has an approach where he changes the focus from sales to more of building the relationship.
And if someone would like to put Rich Litvin's name in the chat to all, that could be useful for probably everybody on the call. So thank you. Terry, what would you add?
Well, Raksha, I can really relate to your question as a newer coach and with a similar question of my own. But I would say, in my experience, everyone that you're in contact with or that you know is a potential client or someone who's going to recommend you. So don't forget to tell people about your new journey and what you're doing now and why you love it and why you're on this journey. It really inspires them to ask more questions, and it can really lead to more curiosity from others.
And Nancy.
Hi, Raksha. Thank you for sharing all of that. So first, I want to highlight and acknowledge what the gifts that you already, your people that you've talked to already have shared about you, those natural qualities of being a coach. But what would it look like to let go of the consulting identity and adopt this coaching hat in the way that you would approach your new endeavor now?
All right, and I'm going to leave it for her to think about so that we can continue on. Yeah, Karen McRae, did you have a question or something to add?
No, I thought of something to add.
Yay!
That when Nancy was talking, popped up in my head just now. The idea is focusing on one person and talking to one person. And I don't mean that in a literal sense of like you just find one person, but think about who you would most want to work with. And, is there someone in your life that's like that? And then when you think about explaining or talking about what you do, it's like you're having a conversation with that person. And in a way, it's like, creating an avatar, if we're going to be like in marketing speak. And I have a video link that I would love to share in the chat. And Tony was the one who brought this to my attention. It's called story branding, but it's like an exercise on YouTube that's about 15 minutes. That's it. That's the guy, Donald Miller. But it's an exercise he takes people through to get like really clear on who they help. And then having that clarity might make it easier to then talk about. That's all. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. See, I love it. See how we're all synergizing now? Wendy, anything to add? All right, Wendy, I'll just skip over you. Oh, there you go.
Sorry,
You're good.
my mouse stopped working, so I had to use my manual. I would just gift you the belief and trust in the process of what you're doing is right and your intentions are there. And I think that it will unfold within itself. So trust in the process.
Excellent. And in the interest of time, Cheryl, Lynn, Jennifer, and Ira, I'm going to ask that you go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat if you have anything to add, if it's okay. Unless one of you has something burning, in which case you can raise your hand. Okay. All right. So we're going to wrap this up with Raksha just sharing, how was this process for you?
Very good. I was like rapidly writing down notes. Very good input, some thought-provoking. He was, so yeah, I certainly can see me going through each of these points and thinking about what should be my mindset going forwards.
Excellent.
Very helpful.
So that is the best example going in cold and doing it on Zoom of a mastermind experience. The reason I like using this process is because I can do what I just did, which is cut it off halfway through and kind of watch the time. And as a facilitator, you're going to be wanting to do that. So I want to hear now. So we have some people here that I want you to know about. So Karen Gifford, my co-host here, has done masterminds with me, and Doug Gefeller, raise your hand, Doug. Karen and Doug and I were in a mastermind group, the three of us, for senior coaches for a lot of years. I don't even remember how many, but it was just amazing experience. And that was the second mastermind group with coaches that I've been in. And I would say, as probably you guys also experienced, that when you guys were talking to Raksha and giving her your ideas and asking her the questions and kind of brainstorming, even being in business for as long as I have, things were lighting up in my brain that I could do. It's just this magic synergistic process. And so I would like to reach out to Karen first and Doug and say, is there anything that either of you would like to share about the mastermind process that you think would be really valuable for people to know? So Karen, would you jump in first?
Sure. I think part of it is just wholeheartedly participating when you decide to join. Don't be afraid. It's okay to make mistakes. We learn through failure, which is just first attempt in learning. So I would encourage just going in, go all in, and enjoy the ride as well. Enjoy the process.
And Doug, what would you add? Doug used to run groups that are for CEOs, by the way, for years. That was his whole business.
I ran mastermind groups for CEOs for about 16, 18 years. I forget which it is. And typically had 4 groups a month of a dozen people. So those were a lot of mastermind meetings. I want to comment on the process, not to be critical of the process, but the way in which I do it a little bit different. With CEOs, and have found it very successful for me. Number one is great in the way she had it. Number 2 is extremely important in going around the table and having the other people in the group comment. However, I always focused those comments on clarifying what the problem was that you brought to the mastermind group. So the questions all focused on what really is the problem. And when everybody had finished their comments on that, then we asked the person, Rasha, to restate the problem. And in my years of experience, they never restated the same problem. That through the questioning, it became clearer to them what the real issue was that they were asking for help on. And I think that's a key distinction that I found very helpful for me, that when you're really dealing in problem-solving mode, that you might want to consider. But other than that, I love the process, Nahid. And mastermind groups, I mean, I spent a lot of years starting companies and managing companies, and I never learned as much as I did by facilitating mastermind groups, getting people with different backgrounds and hearing them share their ideas and focus on one person and one problem for a period of time.
Yeah, and I think what Doug's saying is so important. I think one thing, though, that's important to understand is if you guys end up doing self-managed masterminds, you don't have to be an expert like Doug right away. And sometimes you're not going to be able to kind of manage the types of questions that come in. So even with just this light example that we did here today, Raksha got some good value. But now imagine as you grow trust in your group and you get better and better at asking questions, and then you start focusing those questions on how do we get to what's really the issue here? Just imagine how powerful that can be. And I've seen Doug in action, and it's pretty powerful. So thank you, Doug, for adding that. What questions do you have? What questions do you have about mastermind groups, Raksha?
So typically, what is the duration of a mastermind? Is it always just 1 hour or can be longer?
No, in fact, 1 hour is usually too short, which is why we had to do the abbreviated version. I don't know how long yours were, Doug, but typically, if you meet in person, you can do 3 or 4 hours. And that gives people adequate time to really sort of dive in. And this process could be stretched to, nearly an hour a piece, depending on how the group process goes. Often what I would recommend is that a mastermind group meets at least twice per month. If you meet less than twice per month, and you're only meeting monthly, people lose momentum. If they miss one, then they go a whole 2 months without reconnecting with everybody. So you'll see on my tip sheet, I just say the group meets twice per month, but there's various ways you can do it. So for the virtual mastermind groups, usually I like to do 90 minutes on Zoom, but then twice per month. And we don't take everybody through the process at every meeting. We'll take maybe 2 or 3 people through the process at each meeting.
Yeah, Nahid, that's a great framing, and there are lots of ways to frame it. So, and what you said to begin with, I just want to reinforce it as you run mastermind groups and get into some of the areas where Doug is coaching, or leading mastermind groups where he's potentially also coaching some of these CEOs. So the relationship also can shift and change. And it's about listening to what the group needs are as well. So Nahid's come up with a great structure, and you can also adjust the structure. I think that's just important to realize.
Yeah. It's like, this is just like a baseline that I use because I can flex it and change it. And it just kind of gives me the 5 steps, so I can do it in a meeting like this with nobody knowing each other. Well, I know some of us know each other, but general idea. But then I can also use this version in a more expanded way to dive very, very deep in a longer extended session.
Karen just reminded me of something that I can't believe I forgot. And that is that I really started my coaching practice as a result of mastermind groups. My initial clients all came from the mastermind groups I was running. Because I had got to know them and know their issues, it became very logical to become their coach. And as a process, it was so exciting for me. I then had to debate, which business do I want to be in? I didn't have time to be in both, and decided coaching was where I got the most personal satisfaction, although mastermind groups is where I learned the most.
So that's interesting. We can add that to your list, Raksha, to everybody's list, run a mastermind group, and then who knows, those people might become your first clients.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a list of tips here. I'm just going to go over them really quick, but I would like you guys to ask questions because this is the place where we can have more of a discussion. Nancy.
Yeah, I do have a question. So if we do create form mastermind groups out of this, do you suggest that we follow this, your guideline or process?
I would suggest that you use it as a baseline. And then if somebody has somebody in your group has a process that they like better and everybody else in the group likes it, then, there's no dictating what you do. But so this is here kind of as an anchor and something that you can use, but again, you can use it. It's really up to the group. So let me actually go into that. This is what we're going to be doing with the mastermind program. The masterminds are actually going to be launched in March. And the only people that are going to be considered for mastermind groups are the ones that fill out that survey. So the survey is going to go out via email either tonight or tomorrow night, but it is also in those registration meeting information. There's a link to it. So the one today isn't going to be on the website anymore, but if you go into meetings and you go into the February 27th meeting, you don't have to sign up for the meeting. But if you haven't filled out the survey, that's a great place to link through the survey and make sure you fill it out. We are going to have 2 options for masterminds. We're going to have one option where you join a professionally facilitated mastermind group with someone like Karen or someone like a Doug, someone who's got lots of experience in running mastermind groups. That will be a paid experience, but you won't have to think about anything. All you have to do is pay the money and show up, and it will be run by your facilitator. Okay. The second option will be, I don't have the money to invest in that, and I would like to be involved in peer-led groups. And that's what this tip sheet is for. It's to help you figure out with your group. So you'll be assigned to a group. I am guessing we're going to put 6 people in a group. Could be a little more, a little bit less. And it'll be up to your group to make all of these decisions together. You can decide how to share facilitation responsibilities. You can decide if you wanted to do in person or on Zoom. If you do it in person, you can decide where you want to meet. So all of those decisions will be yours as a group. And that's why there's this sheet here, because this sheet at least narrows it down from an infinite number of possibilities to some best practices. And when in doubt, start here. Okay, and then go with whatever you want. So with that said, kind of knowing now how we're going to do it. So basically, we're going to take all the surveys by the end of February. We're going to look at them, and then we're going to start calling the people that have filled out the surveys, and we're going to match them into groups. Okay. So with all that said, what other questions do you have? Or would you like me to go over the tips? Completely up to you. We've got 10 more minutes. All right, well, if you don't, go ahead.
How about jumping in on the tips? Because there's some great ones here, and I think they'll spawn other questions.
Yeah, I think they probably do. Okay. So we already talked about the group meets twice per month, can be virtual, in person, or combination of the two. The reason for that one is because in the groups that I've been in that they've only met once per month, it was too long between meetings. And often the meeting was canceled and then you went 2 months, you just lost your momentum. If it's a self-directed group, which means no one is paid to run it, it's best for the group to clarify and potentially rotate roles. Some of the roles might be facilitator, organizer, or host, right? Because someone offers up their home, that's enough energy expended, right? Maybe someone else comes in and facilitates. Maybe the rest of the people organize and making sure everybody's invited. Maybe somebody else organizes the food. So just talk about that. Have group ground rules to maintain psychological safety. So what I mean about that is confidentiality, of course, but there's also ground rules around advice giving, right? So we only give advice in the way we share it, sort of in that one step. And there's a lot of ground rules around that, because the one thing that's going to shut everyone down quicker than anything, if you get one person that just gets their needs met by being the expert in the group and telling everybody else what to do, that'll just shoot the dynamic down the down the toilet faster than anything else. Doug.
On the comment about advice giving, the thing that I found ate up the most time in meetings is people telling about their experiences. You absolutely have to cut it off and get to what solution they're advocating, because we all have such wonderful stories to tell. It can eat up a whole meeting.
Yeah. Which reminds me, one of the best practices that I use, which I think I have down here, is I always have the volunteer set their own timer. I've been in groups where someone takes timekeeper control and they're the one that sets the timer, and it puts them in the awkward position of having to interrupt the person. The idea is when you're talking, you're caught up in your thoughts. You want to have the freedom to not think about the time. When your alarm goes off, that'll jolt you out of it and you'll go, okay, now I got to wrap this up. But often I've been in groups where we haven't done that, and just what Doug said happened. People just get caught up in their story. And then someone asks them a clarifying question, and then they start talking more. And then they start talking more. Before you know, 30 minutes, 40 minutes has gone by, and we haven't moved anywhere. So that's just going to take some learning and some experience. So that leads us to number 4, have group ground rules about how to manage time. Right. So if we find something like that is happening in our group, then maybe we set a timer for the 7-minute section, or we make that 10 minutes or whatever. And when the timer goes off, no more questions, right? Even if only one question was asked and the entire 10 minutes was taken up by the stories around that question. So sometimes it's just going to be like that. It'll end up being fine no matter what, because you're a group of human beings bonding together, and you're learning a lot about each other, and you're supporting each other. So even when you have really weird dynamics, it turns out to be a great experience. I'll tell you about my mastermind that was not the one with Doug and Karen. It was a mastermind group I did back in 2009 from ICF. So it was coaches. We had a big diverse group. We had one person that was a CEO coach, and he made tons of money, and he was very CEO business-like. We had somebody who was a spiritual coach, and sometimes the things that she was talking about, a lot of us didn't understand because of some of the stories she said when she shared her spiritual experiences. And then another one probably should have been in therapy because she spent most of the meetings crying. So that's what we had as our group. despite that, and we had other people in the group too, that were just coaches like me and somebody else that was kind of a trainer. So we had about 5 or 6 of us in the group, but with that disparity, with that crazy disparity, that was one of the most emotionally supportive experiences I felt like I ever had. I always looked forward to those meetings. And when the facilitator said, only 2 of us are going to show up tonight, maybe we should cancel, I was always so sad. So it really doesn't, none of this stuff matters. It's like going, even if you do like an average subpar experience, it's still going to be amazing.
Now,
And-
could you add one other thing when
Yeah.
you're talking about the groups and that diversity and then the time idea? It's like, is there a group size that you found in your experience, or Doug in yours, that you think makes the magic really happen?
Go ahead, Doug.
12 is what I limited it to. More than 12 is just became unmanageable. 7 is a really good sized group, so someplace between there.
Yeah. I've done between 6 and 8. That feels like a magic number to me.
And I've done between 6 and 9. I've done 12, but it was not, it was too much from what we were doing, what I was doing. So just thanks.
Excellent question, Karen. Thank you. Have a group decision-making process to deal with issues that come up along the way. So just agree with how you're going to come up with issues, with how you're going to deal with issues, because unexpected things will happen. Wendy.
I just want to take note. I think Tony has a question.
Oh, Tony.
I do have a question. I'm just captivated by this concept of needing to restrain storytelling. Because I'm not sure whether somebody's story is going to be meaningful kind of until I've heard the story. So what is your best advice for managing the storytelling without dumping a bucket of cold water on the mastermind group?
Doug, I'm going to let you handle this.
Well, number one, you better have it as a rule ahead of the situation. Otherwise, it becomes too personal. So you set that up at the very first meeting, and you enforce it as you go along. You know, at the end of the session, we would frequently say, you know what, now, hey, Tony, I'd love to hear that story that Doug didn't let you tell us. Could you share it with us now? But really, you just have to do it. Otherwise, I'm hearing all about Tony and not hearing about solving the problem.
Yeah, and I think there's also going to be different cultures in different mastermind groups too, Tony. So one of the things that on our survey that we ask is, do you prefer something more structured or less structured? So that's something that we ask on the survey form. Some people who are very structured are going to get very impatient with like side conversations and tangents, whereas other people are really going to feel interrupted if those side conversations and tangents don't get fully explored. So we are asking you some questions about your personality a little bit to kind of match you together with other people that might have the same styles. And I would say that a CEO group is a little bit of a different type of animal than a coaches group, in that often coaches are going to maybe want to have a little bit more of the personal stories included, whereas CEOs are going to be very motivated to get to the end. And but although I'll make sure that I check with Doug on that, because I could be stereotyping CEOs as well.
I think the size of the group and how much time you have is the most important thing about the storytelling issue. When I was in a group with Karen and Nahid, we did a lot of storytelling, okay? But there was 3 of us. It was social and it was business both. But when you get a dozen people in a meeting, you just cannot do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Tony. Part of it is also, as Nahid's trying to talk about, with all these different groups, there's ways of working. We used to call them rules of engagement. about how do we want to engage in a group. And at the beginning, when I started with mastermind groups or putting groups together, I was setting those rules because it felt more efficient and productive from a time perspective. And what I learned over time was that it was better for the group to come up with the rules or the ways of working, so that, to Doug's point earlier, it's like set ahead of time, let people know what's expected, or everybody knows ahead of time whether or not you're going to get cut off if your story gets too long, or whatever the issue might be or the challenge might be. So the group can decide is what I'm trying to say.
Raksha.
To Nahid's point, coaches are the worst storytellers, much worse than CEOs.
All right, Raksha.
So just a quick clarification, when you're referring to like the storytelling, because like what you did now was this one person is sharing the issues and then others are asking questions, offering solutions. Is the storytelling, are you talking about the person who's sharing the issues or the others?
Well, I think it's usually the person that's usually what happens is someone asks a question and the person starts to answer it, and then they begin to feel like they need to provide more context. And so they start adding context on, and more context and more context. So they start explaining more and more and more. And the more they explain about the situation as they're experiencing it, the more it fills up the time, the more all the coaches sit around being great listeners, but the less time is left to actually say, yeah, but what's underneath all that? Because as coaches, you all know that the situation that's presented is not the situation. And I'm going to pass it to Rania because we need to wrap up here.
Yes. Should I ask? I just have a quick question.
Okay.
Sorry. So when the groups meet twice a month or once a month, is there an outline for their meeting, like an objective of every meeting, or they just come together and whatever topic is burning, they'll talk about it?
Well, so typically what we do, so we've got this process, right? What I've done, for example, when we've met in person is, we kind of meet, we grab appetizers, we chat a little bit, but then we start the process. And in some groups, everybody gets time. And so the time that we have is divided into how much time everybody gets. And you can use a process or not. In one of the coaching groups I was in, nobody used a process. So you got to use your time for however you wanted. And if you wanted to just vent for however long you had, you did that. But going through a process like this will help you get useful information. So you could bring an issue to the table. In some cases, we say we're going to do 3 of these, and then we're just going to talk like friends for the rest of the time, right? So you can sort of decide as a group how you want to structure it. It should just be something that works for the group. And that, as Karen suggested, takes time and exploration. Okay, there's so much more to talk about. So come back on February 27th to our live in-person meeting where we can talk about this more and give you the same experience, but give it to you kind of in person. And if we have time, we might even break you into small groups to do the in-person, to run the in-person process yourself. We have to wrap up. Rania, I'm going to pass it back to you for whatever we need to do to wrap it up today.
Thank you so much, Nahid, for a very informative session. And thank you, Karen, and everyone for being here. Make sure to fill out the survey if you want to be part of the master group. So look in your mailbox for today or tomorrow, you're going to get the email. And again, come again on February 27th to hear more about Mastermind. I don't want you also to miss on our mixers. So every month we meet as coaches, just to have fun together. So our March mixer will be in Rancho Capistrano Winery. That will be March 5th. So pencil that down in your calendar. That will be like a mini mastermind too, when you sit together with coaches and talk about your experiences. So looking forward to see all of you. Thank you so much for being here. And you'll hear from us through the emails. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all. Thank you for being here and thank you for engaging. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye all.